Today we're going to discuss the top 10 reef tank parameters. Here are the top 10 reef tank parameters, in my opinion. Number 10, ammonia. Ammonia is a toxic waste in your aquarium, except for when you are cycling your tank. You want ammonia levels to be as close to zero as possible. Many people really don't think about ammonia because once a tank has been up and running, there should be no ammonia, but things happen. Fish death, unexpected objects falling in the water, etc. It is often an overlooked parameter, and when something's going wrong in your tank, it's always a good idea to test for ammonia. Number 9, iodine. The ideal iodine levels are between 0.04 and 0.06 parts per million. Be careful, because iodine, if left in too high of concentrations above 0.07, can actually be detrimental to your tank. So you don't want to be dosing iodine without testing your levels. Iodine as a trace element is important to several macroalgae, shrimp, and coral species. But because natural levels are so low, about 0.06 parts per million, it is very difficult to test and maintain these levels with standard test kits. ICP testing is recommended for dosing because elevated levels of iodine can be detrimental to your corals and fish. Corals seem to have more problems with high intensities as well as pathogens. When the iodine concentration is low, keep in mind that not only the organisms in your tank will deplete the iodine, also activated carbon will bind serious amounts of iodine. Number 8, magnesium. Maintaining proper magnesium levels helps achieve the essential balance of calcium and alkalinity in your tank by preventing excess calcium carbonate precipitation. Ideal magnesium levels are between 1250 and 1350, but a good rule of thumb is to have your magnesium level about 3 times your calcium level. So if your calcium level is 420, you'd want to have your magnesium at least 1260. Number 7, phosphate. Phosphate is important in the reef tank because it will have excess phosphate will lead to excess algae, but ideal phosphate levels are between 0.01 and 1 part per million. Phosphorus limitation can lead to decreased growth rates, worse polyp extension, worse coral coloration, and death. So you do want to have some phosphate in your tank, but not too much. If nutrient levels are high, you also get problems with your corals, algae growth, cyanide, etc. Make sure to keep your phosphate below 0.4 parts per million. Number 6, nitrate. Ideal nitrate levels are between 0.25 and 1 part per million. Nitrate is the accumulation end product of the aerobic nitrogen metabolism process, which happens naturally within the aquarium from the waste products from fish. If there is no nitrate in your tank, your corals might be nitrogen limited. Nitrogen limitation can also lead to decreased growth rates, worse polyp extension, and coral coloration. If nutrient levels are too high, you will also get problems with your corals, algae growth, cyanide, etc. You want to keep your nitrate levels below 2 parts per million, but again, not 0. Number 5, calcium. Corals are made of calcium and carbonate. So to have your corals grow, you need to have both in the proper levels. A calcium level of between 400 and 450 parts per million is optimal for coral growth. But most importantly, consistently. You want to maintain your levels without large fluctuations. Number 4, pH. A good pH to aim for is between 8.2 and 8.4. The pH will fluctuate from the morning to the evening. A fluctuation of 0.3 pH is often observed. but this should be minimized as much as possible. If the pH drops below 7.8 at night, something in your system needs to be optimized. High surface flow, as well as keeping your skimmer running and even bringing outside air in to feed your skimmer, can help elevate the levels. I did put a little graph over here. This is what my pH looks like over the course of several days. You can see that it does peak right at the time that the main lights go out. It also drops down to just under 8 at night, and I do have a refugium that I run at night. Again, the key to being successful in this hobby is consistency. If your pH is in the range of 7.8 to 8.4, don't chase the numbers. I see a lot of people out there trying to chase high pH, and as long as you're in that range of 7.8 to 8.4, don't go and chase numbers. Number 3, alkalinity. The alkalinity, carbonate hardness, or KH, is very important to buffer the pH of your tank. Carbonate is also one of the major building blocks for corals to form their argonite and calciate skeletons. Alkalinity swings are detrimental to SPS corals, so maintaining a consistent level is more important than the actual level itself, as long as it is in that range of 7 to 12 DKH. The recommended levels are between 7 and 10. Most people aim for somewhere around 8 or 9, because then if it does fluctuate a little bit, you have a little bit of barrier. But again, the key to being successful is consistency, and alkalinity swings can be detrimental to your SPS corals. Number 2, salinity. The key to being successful in this hobby is consistency. Again, keeping a consistent salinity will help keep all of your other parameters in balance. Recommended levels are about 35 parts per thousand, or a specific gravity of 1.024 to 1.026. I usually tell people to make sure that you test your salinity at least weekly, because if your salinity is in line, then most of your other parameters will be also. I see sometimes people they start going crazy and adding a lot of supplements when their alkalinity or calcium is either high or low, but it's off because the salinity is actually off. And if they were to test that as well, they would be able to fix it without adding a bunch of elements to their water. Also, make sure that your device is properly calibrated. There are different solutions that you can get to calibrate your different monitor. At a salinity of 35 parts per thousand, this is what's found in natural seawater. Chloride, sodium, sulfur, magnesium, calcium, potassium, bromamine, strontium, and fluoride at those specific ranges. And number 1, temperature. This is also an often overlooked parameter when it comes to reef tank, but if your temperature goes out of whack, too hot or too cold, everything in your tank is going to die. So maintaining a constant temperature of between 24 and 26 degrees Celsius or 75 and 79 degrees Fahrenheit is optimal. Heater failures are one of the largest reasons for tank crashes and fish and coral deaths. Using a heater with an external controller is recommended, and always having a backup heater in place is ideal. Set it a few degrees lower than your main heater, and then if your main heater would fail in the off position, that second backup heater would jump into place. Also, if you live in an area where your tank gets hot, you want to make sure to have a way to cool it down. Usually, just having a fan that blows over the top of the water, along with turning your lights off, is adequate. But in some places you might need a chiller. Again, the key to being successful in this hobby is consistency. Again, thanks for watching. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe.